Mike King loved Jesus. He wasn't educated or eloquent. In fact, he once described himself as a semi-literate country bumpkin. A grandchild of slaves born in 1899, Mike had very little education, but his love for Jesus drove him to become a circuit preacher. And by 1918, he was the shepherd of 2 small churches. Mike also loved Alberta Williams, but she didn't know it. She was out of his league in every aspect of the phrase. She was as eloquent as her father, the Reverend A.D. Williams, the Reverend Dr. A.D. Williams. He was a renowned preacher and powerful figure in the community. She wore fine clothes and walked with graceful poise and refinement. On the off chance that he would get to meet her, Mike practiced his greeting, hoping to make a really good first impression. You ever done that? You ever done that? Seriously. Do you remember the person that you love right now and you met them for the first time, how you practiced that encounter? Because you knew it was going to happen, right? Because you set it up. You plotted, you schemed. I remember seeing Sean Thomas's picture on the website of this church long before I came. Well, not long before, but before I came to this church, I was looking to see what was going on here. I'd been here a couple of times to fix the phones or to fix the lines of the phones on the outside because I work for the phone company. And I was just thinking, wow, what a great looking guy that is. I'd like to meet him. Then I found out he was a singer. He could play the piano, and as you know, if you've heard me preach before, all through my young ministry, I started preaching in the 1970s when I was but a wee little child. I really did. And everybody would tell me, one of these days, God's going to bless you with a wife who can play the piano. Really bless your ministry. And I didn't have the heart to call him a false prophet, but you know. But God did bless me with someone that could play the piano. You know, God did make some of that come through. So they just maybe weren't dialed in completely, right, when they told me this stuff. So I remember meeting Sean Thomas for the first time. The first Sunday I came to church here, he wasn't here, and that's okay because I didn't come to meet Sean. I came because I needed to be in a place of Christian fellowship. I had been pastoring for 13 years in a small church in Lake Worth, Florida, and I had decided a year previous that it was just too much to do this anymore. I can't be true to myself. I can't be who I am and stay in this pulpit. So I resigned. And I took a year off. But because faith and because my relationship with God has been such a powerful part of my life, has been always a part of my life, I decided I needed to come to church. And so I started looking up churches on the web that would accept me. And it really wasn't the gay part that I was worried about people accepting, because I'm not normal. Yeah. So, and you know, being a Pentecostal preacher for all those years, I mean, how do you find a church that will accept gay Pentecostal or ex-gay or gay, whatever the label is? How do you find somebody that's going to put up with somebody like me? So I started looking at the websites of different churches, and I want to tell you that websites are very, very important. Because some websites I looked at was like, I'm not going to that church. They don't even look alive. This is like a funeral home that happens to have church. So make sure if you're going to do a website that you don't do a funeral website, that you do a lively church website, right? Well, this church had one of those, and I'm sure still does. I haven't been on your website in a while. But anyway, websites are important. But I remember coming to church the next week, and Sean was doing what Sean did then. He was the worship leader, minister of music, whatever his title was at the time. And sure enough, you know, he was just as the picture showed, and I had done some research on him and heard him sing some of his songs online. I was like, yeah, I'd like to get to know someone like him, you know? I hope he has a good sense of humor, you know? And I remember after service meeting him right back there in front of that closet that's under the stairs, right there. He was standing back there, I believe, selling tickets to the Gem and Diamonds thing. And he looked at me and shook my hand, and he said, oh, you must be the person that Pastor Paul's been telling me about. And I said the following, have no idea what was that came out. It was not speaking in tongues. It was like tripping over my tongue, right? Just kind of freaked out by the whole. He touched my hand. So you know that feeling, right? You know, right? You plan it. So Mike, who loved Alberta, I go off on these tangents, I apologize. Thank God I've got notes today. Mike had practiced. All right, what am I going to say to her? Because she is way above me. I'm a country bumpkin. She is way, way above me. But I'm going to meet her. And when I meet her, I'm going to introduce myself as Mike King. I am also a minister. Oh, yeah. That would impress her because her dad is a really, really well-known minister, right? Really, really well-known. And so, the chance came for him to sweep her off of her feet. And instead of saying his well-rehearsed lines, he spoke from all the years of being a country bumpkin and said, I was preaching in 2 places. And immediately was embarrassed by the words that came out of his mouth. And he walked away in shame, thinking, she'll never talk to me. She'll never know me. I'm not eloquent. I don't talk like her. I don't talk like her dad. I talk like my dad and his dad. Surely, she would never think of him again. That's what he thought. So you know what he did? Instead of wallowing in the self-pity, instead of wallowing in not speaking the perfectly refined English that she and her father spoke, he decided to do something. Even though he was a minister, even though he was a preacher, even though he was used to being in front of people speaking, he decided that he was going to go to school. And while going to school, he thrived. He learned so much about the Bible, about himself, about history, about the world around him. And as he thrived, the more confident he became. And guess what? He saw that girl again because he happened to be living in the boarding house that was operated by her father. And she happened to have a broken foot and couldn't go anywhere. So Mike went in to see where Alberta was, and there she was, a captive audience. And this time, he said, it's good to see you again. I'm sure you don't remember me. Now, why would he say that? I'm sure you don't remember me. Why would he say that? Because he convinced himself that he was not enough. Alberta would never remember Mike King because of the way he spoke on their first meeting. Something really amazing happened. Alberta said, oh, I can't forget you. I could never forget a preacher. My father wouldn't allow it. And somehow, all of those weeks and months of embarrassment, of shame, of feeling less than were washed away because Alberta knew his name and saw him for who he was, not the country bumpkin that he thought he was, not the semi-literate country bumpkin on top of that. No, she realized him as Mike King, minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that had value, a value that she held sacred because her father held it sacred. So what do you do after an encounter like that? Well, you do what I do. You ask them out. So Mike King asked Alberta out. Now, come on. She's a 10. And he's like a 2 in his mind. He just knew that there was going to be some other guy out there that could talk the talk and walk the walk and be refined and just be on the same par as the Williams family. But you know what? Because she was a 10 and because she was way out there, no one had ever dared ask her out because they were afraid of her dad. And so Mike King was lucky that day. And she said yes. Now, in the early 1900s, you just didn't go to a movie and a pizza when you were courting. Courting was an 8-year process. Think about that, my lesbian sisters. That's stereotyping. That's wrong. I didn't write that down. That was just right here in my head. Told you I wasn't normal. But 8 years. 8 years of sitting in the parlor talking and driving and, driving in the country, chaperone in the Model T. 8 years. They finally got married. And in the first 4 years of their marriage, they had 3 kids. Michael, Alfred, Christine, little Mike. Well, Mike finished his education, and in 1931, after his father, I didn't tell you this, they actually moved into her parents' house with them. I don't know what stereotype that is, but I don't think I'd ever want to do that. But in 1931, Mike succeeded the Reverend Dr. A.D. Williams and became pastor of their church. It was a time of the Great Depression. We all know the history of our country and the world at that time. Things weren't easy. The church was in debt. And those of you that have ever served on the board or in any kind of leadership position know that it's a pain to keep the lights on at the church. It's a struggle. It's hard work. You depend on the generosity of people. But Mike King had an anointing, had a gift about him. And he was able to raise money and make that church solvent and thriving and strong. And in 1934, they rewarded him by sending him to the Baptist World Alliance Convention, which was being held in Germany. And instead of sending him just to Germany, they footed the bill for him to go walk where Jesus walked, to go see the Holy Land. I'm sure that as the grandson of a slave, he could have never imagined he would go that far when he was walking away from the first encounter with his soon-to-be or would-be wife because he was so overcome with embarrassment and shame. But God changed him. God did something in him and told him, you are more than your name. You are more than your history. You are more than your family history. I'm going to do something special in you. But you see, he couldn't see it right then. And I can't imagine all the thoughts that were going through his head when he stood where Jesus stood. Where he walked, where the church fathers had walked so many years before. Oh, what a long journey he had made. While in Germany, he was fascinated by church history. You know, a lot of stuff has happened in the Christian movement. He saw the place where a preacher nailed his 95 Theses to the door of a church in Wittenberg, railing against the organized religion of the day and espousing this unheard of thought that we are saved by faith in God alone, sparking the Reformation. That man's name who dared to go against the history of the church, his name was Martin Luther. My king was so moved by that he came home and changed his name to Martin Luther King, and changed his little boy's name to Martin Luther King Jr. When someone calls your name or says your name, what thoughts do you think come to their mind? Several of you have asked me about my husband. We've been together over 13 years now. Can you believe it? From to, what do you need from the store today, honey? What do you think of? When I hear his name, I think of someone that loves me for nothing, who sees me for who I am, and hasn't walked away from me yet. When people hear my name, I hope that they hear someone that loves to laugh, that loves Jesus, that loves this world that we live in. What is it that people think when they say or hear our names? I want to challenge you today and let you know that you are more than your name. You are more than the perception that people have of you, and even greater, you are more than the perception that you may have of yourself. I want to encourage you to stop selling yourself short. Stop calling yourselves the unflattering names that you call yourself. And realize that God knows your name. God knows who you are. God sees you and loves you in spite of all the stuff that you see about yourself that you don't like. And God isn't intimidated by any of the stuff in your life. Not one thing. Well, this is good preaching. Amen. We live in a world that labels everything. That's a red barn. That's a green car. Oh, that's a green house. That's a fat preacher. I've never had any comfort in my life listening to fat preachers tell me what I should and should not do. There's something wrong with that. You know what I mean? Don't tell me I can't go bowling if you can't quit eating. I didn't write that down either. But our world labels things. Think about all the stuff that we go through just in our community of labels. Gay, lesbian, straight, bi, trans male, trans female, asexual, intersexual. What are the labels? You could write books and books of the stuff that we go through because of labels. Now, am I against it? No, but we are more than the labels that people stick on us. When I walk through the streets, or when I walk downtown City Place, or when I walk at work, it doesn't say Brian Ladd, gay fat preacher. It doesn't say that. It just says Brian. I don't even have a name tag. What am I talking about? Maybe on some of my undergarments there's a name tag in case I get lost. But we don't wear name tags, do we? We have a driver's license or an ID card or some form of identification, but on my driver's license it doesn't say Brian Ladd loves pizza. Can you tell? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say Brian Ladd, a white boy from South Carolina who loves Clemson. Oh, bless their hearts. It's just labels. God doesn't look at us through a lens that has labels. God looks at us as dear children and sees us as everyone that is unique, that has value, that has character. And man, some of us have a lot of character. Some of us have been driven inside of shells and hiding because of labels that people attach to us and because of labels that we willingly accept. And what I want you to understand today is people may call you one thing, but Jesus and God sees you as something else. Our meeting today is an encounter between Jesus and Peter for the very, very first time. This is Simon Peter. Or this is Simon. That's what it said. This is Simon. And Jesus is like, no. You're going to be called Cephas, Peter, rock. People may think you're just a fisherman. People may think you're wishy-washy, but no, I see you as a rock. So everybody else can call you Simon. I'm going to call you Peter because that's who I see you as. So today I want to encourage you. Don't be afraid of who you are. Don't be afraid of what God has called you to be. If you're gay, be a proud gay. If you're a lesbian, be a proud lesbian. Just cut back on the U-Haul bills. Now you see, I just put the label on you. It's a
true label, though.
It is, I know. Be proud of who God made you to be. Because if you can withstand the loving, compassionate gaze of God, who cares how other people look at you? Pray with me. Oh God, I can say with the psalmist today that you made me and you have known my frame. You know the number of hairs on my head even as they become less and less through the years. You know. You know the intent of my heart. And all of us in this room today, as your children, we ask you today for grace, for power, for courage, for confidence to live into the name that you have given us. Help us to not be afraid to take chances. And as Mike King or Martin Luther King Sr. help us to not be afraid to take a chance to go beyond the things that we think we're capable of. Help us to look for love, for peace, for understanding in ways that we've never considered. So that one day we can look back and say, wow, look what the Lord has done. I pray that you encourage my friends in this room today. Let them know that you know them right well, and that you're proud of them, that you see them as a father or mother beholds their children in complete love, complete acceptance.